The Hammer and the Flame. In the land of Judea, a shadow fell. A foreign king, Antiochus, demanded that the people forsake their traditions and worship his gods. The holy temple in Jerusalem was desecrated, and sadness covered the land. In the small town of Modane lived an old priest named Maccabees with his 5 brave sons. He saw the suffering of his people, and his heart burned with righteous anger. He would not bow to the cruel king's decree. When the king's officers came to Modane to force the people to sacrifice to idols, Maccabees refused. "Even if all the nations obey the king," he cried, "I and my sons will not forsake the covenant of our fathers." In that moment of defiance, a flame was lit. Maccabees and his sons, including the strong Judah and the wise Simon, fled to the hills. A rebellion had begun. Before he died, Maccabees blessed his sons. He named Simon as their counselor and Judah, known as Maccabee, the Hammer, as their commander. "Be zealous for the law," he told them, "and give your lives for the covenant." Judah became a mighty warrior. He gathered a small army of faithful men. They fought not in open fields like the king's great armies, but with surprise attacks from the hills and valleys, striking like a hammer and vanishing like the wind. The king's general, Apollonius, came with a great force to crush the rebellion. But Judah was fearless. He met Apollonius in battle, defeated him, and took the general's own sword to use for the rest of the war. Another army came, led by a general named Saran. He mocked Judah's small band of fighters. But Judah told his men, "Victory does not depend on the size of an army, but on strength that comes from heaven." And with faith as their shield, they were victorious again. The armies of the king were scattered, and the path to Jerusalem was opened. It was time to reclaim what was holy. When Judah and his followers entered the holy temple, they wept. It was in ruins, the gates burned, and an idol stood where the altar should be. They immediately began the work of cleansing and rebuilding. They built a new altar and made new holy vessels. They found only enough pure oil to light the sacred menorah for 1 day, but miraculously, the flames burned for 8 days. A great festival of dedication, Hanukkah, was declared. The war was not over. King Antiochus was furious and sent even larger armies. Judah continued to fight bravely, defending his people and their right to worship freely. He won many more battles against overwhelming odds. In a final great battle, Judah saw the king's commander surrounded by the fiercest royal guards. To save his people, he charged into their midst, fighting with all his might. Though he fell that day, his bravery was never forgotten. The people mourned their great leader, but the fight was carried on by his brothers. Simon, wise and steady, took command and continued to lead the people with strength and wisdom. Under Simon's leadership, the enemy was finally driven from their fortress in Jerusalem. A time of peace and freedom came to Judea. The courage of Maccabees and his sons had saved their people and their faith. Unbreakable vow. In the holy city of Jerusalem, a dark time had begun. A wicked king named Antiochus had forbidden the people from following their sacred laws. He ordered them to eat forbidden food and to bow down to idols. One of the most respected elders was a man named Eleazar, a scribe known for his wisdom and devotion. The king's men brought Eleazar to a public square. They tried to force him to eat pork, which was forbidden by his faith. "I will not disobey the holy laws," Eleazar declared, his voice strong despite his age. "I would rather die with honor than live in shame." Even when they tortured him, Eleazar did not yield. He faced his death with courage, leaving behind a noble example for the young. His bravery was a quiet spark in the growing darkness, a reminder to be faithful until the very end. Soon after, a mother and her 7 sons were brought before the cruel king. They too were commanded to break their sacred laws, but they had heard of Eleazar's courage, and their hearts were filled with the same spirit of faithfulness. The eldest son spoke for them all. "We are ready to die," he said to the king, "rather than transgress the laws of our ancestors." The king was furious and had him executed in a terrible way, but the brother faced it without fear. One by one, the brothers were brought forward, and one by one they refused to obey the king. Their brave mother watched, and instead of weeping with despair, she spoke to each of them, encouraging them to remain faithful and to trust in God's promise of resurrection. Finally, only the youngest son was left. The king tried to trick him, promising riches and power if he would only obey. But the boy looked to his mother, and her strength became his own. He refused the king's offers, speaking with a wisdom far beyond his years. After her last son died, the mother stood alone. She had watched all 7 of her children perish, yet her faith did not waver. She too was put to death, and her story, along with her sons, became a legend of courage and unwavering belief. The stories of Eleazar and the 7 brothers spread like wildfire through the hills of Judea. They inspired a great warrior named Judah Maccabee. He gathered an army not of trained soldiers, but of ordinary people whose hearts were set ablaze with a holy fire. Judah's army was small, but their spirit was mighty. Before each battle, they would pray, remembering the sacrifices of the martyrs. They knew their strength came not from numbers or weapons, but from heaven. The king sent a wicked general named Nicanor to crush the rebellion. Nicanor was arrogant and cruel. He mocked Judah's faith and threatened to burn down the holy temple in Jerusalem if the people did not surrender. Judah heard of Nicanor's threat, and his resolve hardened. He gathered his men and told them, "Do not be afraid of their numbers. Remember how our ancestors were saved. Let us fight for our laws and our temple." The battle was fierce, but Judah's army fought with the strength of lions. They trusted in God to defend them. They defeated Nicanor's great army, and the wicked general himself was slain. Judah and his men returned to Jerusalem in triumph. They displayed the head of Nicanor from the wall of the city as a sign to all that God had protected his people and his holy temple. And the people of Judea made a decree that this great victory should be celebrated every year. The courage of Eleazar, the mother and her 7 sons, and the might of Judah Maccabee showed everyone that faith and bravery could overcome even the greatest darkness.